More than 2 billion rand vanishes from the accounts of impoverished pensioners, confidential intelligence dockets leak across Pretoria, and state power turns its prosecutorial machinery not upon corporate syndicates, but upon those who challenge the post-apartheid settlement. When judicial inquiries substitute verified facts with third-party hearsay and leaked digital messages, constitutional accountability is replaced by political theatre. Yet, as the Madlanga Commission sought to draw him into an escalating web of unverified inferences, Julius Malema refused the posture of a quiet defendant. Instead, he fired back with an unequivocal warning: "Do not dare me. No judge, no magistrate, and no evidence leader will ever treat an elected voice of the people as a child." This confrontation brings us directly to a fundamental question. If power changes hands, but not structure, has anything really changed? Do not look away. What unfolds next will redefine the balance between the courtroom and the political arena. If this story of resistance and accountability resonates with you, give us your like, share your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe to South African Dynamics to walk with us through this defining chapter. To grasp the sheer magnitude of the political earthquake currently rattling the South African Republic, one must look past the noisy headlines and examine the deep structural fault lines dividing the state apparatus itself. At the epicenter of this confrontation sits the Judicial Commission of Inquiry, chaired by Constitutional Court Justice Mbuyiseni Madlanga. Established ostensibly to untangle the web of systemic corruption, factional policing, and state capture, this extraordinary tribunal was designed to be a definitive legal reckoning. Yet, within the marbled halls of power, what began as a search for systemic clarity has transformed into an intense institutional battleground. It is a fierce jurisdictional collision between the traditional authority of the senior bench and the constitutional mandate of elected parliamentarians serving on the Parliamentary Ad Hoc Committee. The crisis reached an unprecedented boiling point following the brazen assassination attempt against Major General Feroz Khan, a prominent crime intelligence operative, who was ambushed and shot multiple times in Houghton, Johannesburg. That violent shooting did not merely injure a senior officer. It fractured the carefully constructed facade of state security. It laid bare a subterranean war between competing intelligence factions, senior commanders in the South African Police Service, and powerful illicit tobacco cartels operating across KwaZulu-Natal, including networks tied to figures such as Yusuf Kaji. Rather than functioning as an orderly security apparatus, law enforcement appeared dangerously entangled with private financial interests, clandestine meetings, and backroom syndicates. In the wake of this violence, leaked internal dockets and encrypted WhatsApp transcripts suddenly flooded the public sphere. These documents did not immediately lead to the arrest of the underworld financiers who orchestrated the chaos. Instead, they were weaponized to revive the ghost of the VBS Mutual Bank scandal, a catastrophic banking heist in which over 2 billion rand, representing the life savings of impoverished rural pensioners and burial societies, was plundered. Evidence leaders before the commission began stitching together speculative chains of association, focusing heavily on third-party conversations where individuals referenced a docket, an address, or vaguely invoked the title of chief. Rather than interrogating the actual banking executives and corporate fixers who drained the vaults, the legal narrative was subtly steered towards opposition politicians who had previously led aggressive public cross-examinations. This divergence revealed a profound structural contradiction that has haunted South Africa for 3 decades: the clash between genuine accountability and institutional impunity. When an inquiry allows unsubstantiated gossip between 2 men to become the basis for public insinuation against an elected lawmaker, the boundary between justice and political containment dissolves. Why were the corporate moguls and political patrons who arranged secret hotel conclaves in Durban allowed to remain in the shadow, while opposition figures faced relentless televised scrutiny? The legal establishment appeared content to construct cases out of ambient rumors, disregarding the fundamental legal principle that direct evidence must connect an instruction to an individual. The stage was thus set for a colossal institutional reckoning. If the evidence leaders believed that selective dockets and leaked WhatsApp inferences would force Julius Malema into a posture of apologetic retreat, they fundamentally misunderstood the nature of their adversary. As the inquiry prepared to formalize its summons, the commander-in-chief of the economic freedom fighters chose neither compliance nor silence. He launched a blistering counterstrike against the inquiry's chief evidence leader, issuing a defiance that reverberated across the Republic. "Do not dare me." The political temperature reached a boiling point when the proceedings shifted from dry procedural inquiries into a direct explosive clash between judicial authority and political power. At the focal point of this storm stood Advocate Matthew Chaskelson, SC, a senior evidence leader whose past role in the state capture proceedings had already drawn sharp scrutiny from opposition benches. When the commission attempted to construct an adverse inference against Julius Malema, relying on intercepted digital messages between two retired intelligence figures discussing case numbers and files, the EFF commander-in-chief launched a scathing public rebuttal. He did not seek refuge in legal technicalities. Instead, he attacked the very credibility of the prosecutorial method, accusing evidence leaders of attempting to build an indictment out of political fiction and unverified hearsay. For Malema, the controversy went far beyond a dispute over evidence. It struck at the core of parliamentary oversight and democratic representation. Rejecting allegations that he had improper motives when questioning security officials during the parliamentary ad hoc committee hearings, Malema asserted the constitutional prerogative of an elected lawmaker. In a blistering address, he reminded the public that a public representative draws intelligence inquiries and grievances from the entire Republic, from ordinary factory workers and rural voters to trade unionists and even incarcerated citizens seeking justice. When interrogating ministers or participating in the Judicial Service Commission to interview senior judges, a lawmaker does not seek permission from prosecutors on what questions to pose. By attempting to criminalize the origin of parliamentary questions, the Commission, in Malema's eyes, was attempting to subordinate the sovereign voice of Parliament to the unelected authority of judicial commissions. The tension escalated further when Malema turned his focus directly to the evidence leader, declaring with unyielding force that no advocate, magistrate, or judge possessed the authority to demean an elected leader of millions. "I am not a child, and no man is going to speak to me as if I am a boy," he warned, challenging the Commission to produce direct documentary evidence rather than circumstantial deductions. This was not merely courtroom posturing. It was an uncompromising defense of personal and institutional dignity. Before we examine the deeper structural fault lines that mainstream broadcasts routinely overlook, I want to pause and speak directly to you. If this channel brings you the unvarnished analysis of Southern African power dynamics, consider becoming a member of South African Dynamics today. Your membership is not a simple subscription. It directly protects independent, African-centered geopolitical analysis from institutional suppression and funds our ongoing investigative work. Join us and stand with a community dedicated to truth, dignity, and sovereignty. This unfolding Julius Malema testimony turned the Madlanga Commission drama into an unprecedented test of judicial limits. Malema's strategy was clear: challenge the premise of every question, dismantle the logic of indirect culpability, and force the tribunal to operate strictly within the bounds of proven fact. By challenging the evidence leaders to summon him formally under oath, he flipped the script from defense to prosecution. Not reform, not rhetoric, accountability. He made it abundantly clear that if he were compelled to occupy the witness stand, he would transform that very seat of power into a platform to cross-examine the integrity of the state's entire anti-corruption apparatus. Yet this calculated defiance carried immense political risks. By invoking the names of former presidents, cabinet ministers, and police generals to expose institutional hypocrisy, Malema broadened the battlefield, daring the state to apply identical scrutiny to all factions. The institutional collision surrounding the inquiry does not exist in a constitutional vacuum. Its tremors are felt across the entire civic and political landscape of South Africa. When judicial bodies are perceived to operate with uneven intensity, the fragile contract between citizens and the state begins to fracture. For millions of ordinary South Africans living under severe economic strain, the spectacle of commission proceedings raises painful questions about the true purpose of post-apartheid legalism. The public observes a stark double standard while working-class communities face relentless socio-economic hardship. Grand political trials often become mechanisms of elite distraction. This tension is most visible in the selective scrutiny applied to public figures and security chiefs. When Lieutenant General Nalala Mkhwanazi publicly commended Major General Feroz Khan for operational interventions, his statements were treated as professional police assessments. Yet, when opposition figures offered commentary on prosecuting figures such as Advocate Andrea Johnson, those same assessments were transformed by commentators into proof of political interference. This glaring inconsistency strikes at the foundation of institutional fairness. Why is one security narrative celebrated as heroism, while another is framed as subversion? The political ramifications extend into the highest echelons of power. During the parliamentary hearings, serious revelations emerged regarding historical executive interference, including how former President Jacob Zuma, former Police Minister Nathi Mthethwa, and former Crime Intelligence Head Richard Madluli navigated controversial appointments. Clandestine meetings arranged in Durban between security officials and business figures connected to illicit syndicates were revealed, yet these disclosures barely dominated the news cycle. Instead, media headlines focused overwhelmingly on opposition cross-examinations. When institutional inquiries ignore the deep corporate patronage networks, funding instability, and instead fixate on political rhetoric, public cynicism inevitably deepens. It is within this volatile environment that Malema warns Madlanga that a commission operating on double standards risks destroying its own constitutional legitimacy. If an inquiry allows ambient gossip and third-party conversations to substitute for concrete proof, it ceases to function as an impartial arbiter. It reduces the majesty of the law to a blunt political instrument alienating citizens who expect equal justice under the Constitution. When the legal process appears partisan, it damages not only the standing of the bench, but also the public's faith in democratic governance. Is Julius Malema right to challenge the evidentiary basis of these proceedings, or should judicial commissions hold unrestrained authority to question elected leaders? Take a moment right now to write your city, your country, and your perspective in the comments below. South African Dynamics would like to express our deepest gratitude to our global community across the United States, the African diaspora, and beyond. May your journey continue with unwavering dignity, truth, and resilience. The broader civic consequence is an electorate increasingly disillusioned with performative accountability. The working people of South Africa do not measure justice by the eloquence of legal advocates or the length of televised inquiries. They measure justice by whether plundered resources are returned, whether public institutions protect the vulnerable, and whether the law applies equally to the powerful and the marginalized. When commissions fail to deliver systemic reform, and instead become stages for factional battles, the legitimacy of the entire democratic transition is called into question. Yet this brewing crisis can no longer be contained within South African borders. The implications of this institutional battle are already reverberating across global financial centers and foreign policy circles. Beyond the borders of Southern Africa, the fierce institutional confrontation unfolding in Pretoria is being monitored with intense scrutiny across Western diplomatic missions, London trading desks, and Washington policy circles. For decades, international financial institutions and foreign governments have viewed South Africa through the prism of constitutional predictability and investor confidence. Whenever the traditional authority of the judiciary is openly contested, foreign risk analysts quickly raise alarms over market certainty, commercial stability, and institutional governance. From the vantage point of Western capitals, aggressive challenges to judicial commissions are frequently characterized as threats to the rule of law, prompting immediate warnings regarding capital flight credit ratings and diplomatic friction across the continent. Yet for millions within the African diaspora and seasoned observers across the United States, who have closely followed the global struggle for civil rights and socio-economic emancipation, the perspective is entirely different. They do not view this clash merely as political theater or procedural rebellion. They recognize it as a profound reckoning with the unresolved compromises of the post-apartheid settlement. Through this diaspora lens, the confrontation cannot be divorced from the broader battle against South Africa corruption, where vast quantities of public wealth have vanished while systemic economic disparities remain largely unaddressed. For these observers, questioning whether legal institutions apply different standards to corporate elites versus elected political leaders is not an assault on democracy, but an essential demand for genuine constitutional equality. This global divide expanded significantly with each Madlanga Commission bombshell as international correspondents and intelligence analysts began to realize that the inquiry was revealing deep vulnerabilities within the nation's security and intelligence apparatus. While mainstream Western media outlets often portray Julius Malema's unyielding stance as an unpredictable force, Pan-African thinkers interpret it as a resolute refusal to allow judicial mechanisms to stifle radical political transformation. The international community is gradually coming to understand that true democratic resilience cannot be preserved by legal formalism alone if that formalism shields entrenched power from public scrutiny. As the international community watches this high-stakes geopolitical drama unfold with mounting apprehension, the critical question remains how this historic confrontation will reshape the political destiny of the Republic itself. As South Africa stands at this critical institutional crossroad, the ultimate question is no longer whether Julius Malema will eventually be summoned before the Madlanga Commission, but what happens to the Republic when he occupies the witness chair. Should he step into the chamber, it will not be the routine appearance of a submissive political figure answering a prosecutor's ledger. It will be a seismic clash between two competing visions of state authority, one rooted in narrow judicial formalism, and another anchored in the uncompromising voice of a popular democratic mandate. If the inquiry fails to establish a direct, unbroken chain of documentary evidence linking him to illicit instructions, Malema will transform the witness stand into a national platform of political vindication, exposing the vulnerabilities of the legal establishment. Yet the road ahead carries profound institutional risks for every stakeholder involved. Should evidence leaders produce incontrovertible documentation or credible testimony that withstands aggressive cross-examination, the rhetoric of total defiance could rapidly collapse into legal vulnerability. But if the Commission relies merely on speculative inferences and hearsay from factional intelligence networks, it will severely erode the constitutional authority of the judiciary itself. This delicate balance reflects an existential choice between silence versus voice in a developing democracy. When democratic institutions attempt to stifle elected representatives through selective prosecution, the public does not retreat into quietude. Instead, the demands for systemic transformation grow louder. Not silence, not noise, truth. The future stability of South Africa cannot be purchased through backroom settlements or the criminalization of parliamentary oversight. It demands a transparent constitutional order where justice is applied universally, protecting the economic sovereignty and human dignity of every citizen, regardless of their political allegiance or social standing. Before we reach our final assessment, pause and reflect upon the broader significance of this moment. What you have witnessed is not an isolated courtroom skirmish, but part of an enduring struggle for institutional integrity, historical justice, and sovereign dignity across the African continent. If these deep investigative analyses and uncompromising geopolitical perspectives resonate with you, subscribe to South African Dynamics right now. By subscribing, you do not simply support a digital platform. You choose to walk beside an independent community committed to bringing untold African narratives into global focus. Join us, hit the bell notification, and stand ready for the vital chapters that are already unfolding. Ultimately, the historical verdict on this epic confrontation will not be rendered by legal transcripts alone. It will be decided by whether the South African people can reclaim their institutions from factional warfare and forge a truly sovereign future. The confrontation between parliamentary oversight and judicial authority has arrived at a historic reckoning that will reverberate far beyond the current news cycle. What began as a procedural investigation into intelligence networks and corporate malfeasance has laid bare the deep, unresolved structural tensions at the heart of the post-apartheid transition. As this defining chapter unfolds, Malema warns Madlanga that justice cannot survive upon selective inferences, factional leaks, or political expediency. It demands an uncompromising adherence to constitutional equality and verifiable fact. This dispute is not merely about personalities, dockets, or intercepted digital messages. It is a fundamental struggle over institutional integrity and democratic legitimacy. Every revelation emerging from the Madlanga Commission bombshell serves as a stark reminder that when state institutions are perceived to shield entrenched economic power while cornering vocal representatives of the working majority, the social contract itself is imperiled. A nation cannot heal its historical wounds or dismantle systemic corruption if accountability remains uneven and performative. By refusing the posture of a subdued witness and demanding direct documentary proof, the commander-in-chief of the economic freedom fighters has forced the state into an essential public confrontation. It is in this crucible of institutional power that Malema warns Madlanga and the legal establishment alike. The authority of the bench must never be weaponized to diminish the sovereign mandate of an elected leadership. This pivotal moment leaves the global community and the South African people with an urgent, enduring question. If a nation has the vote, but not the voice, is it truly a democracy? The final verdict will not be drafted in private chambers or recorded in prosecutorial ledgers. It will be decided by the enduring resilience, unyielding dignity, and historical memory of a people determined to forge their own sovereign destiny.